911 dispatchers of Reddit. What are some of the dumbest calls you've gotten? 1. Every Thanksgiving you'll always get the person who calls because they don't know how long to cook a turkey. Never fails. 2. Every Thanksgiving someone always puts a frozen turkey in a deep fryer, usually in a trailer home, and a fire surprisingly occurs. 3. People who have warrants on themselves love calling to complain and ask to see the police in person for a dispute. They don't seem to remember we look up everyone in the dispute, not just the accused. Too many to count. If I had to pick a favorite, I'd have to choose the time a concerned citizen called in an animal stuck in a tree. That animal was a bird. I've been a dispatcher for about 7 years now in a medium-sized county in Florida. Every year on the 4th of July and New Year's we get calls about gunshots. Every single time the caller is perfectly convinced they're gunshots and couldn't possibly be fireworks. They'll say they hear automatic weapons, or my personal favorite, rapid fire shotguns. And every single time a deputy goes out to investigate, it turns out to be the unlikely culprit of fireworks. I had one woman call 911 to tell me she found a cell phone on the ground. That's it. Irate elderly male calls 911 while standing in the sheriff's office lobby to report the clerk not being helpful. When I told him that's not something you use a 911 line for, he went apeshit, going as far as threatening to break into the office and shoot me. He was subsequently arrested. Male was arrested for domestic battery, called 911 from the backseat of the patrol car and stated he was being unlawfully imprisoned. When I told him the only thing I could do for him was to send him more deputies, he said, "No thanks," and hung up. He then proceeded to call 3 more times looking for a different answer. We told the deputies on scene. They took his phone away and added a charge of misuse of 911. Had a woman call in stating she accidentally took too much melatonin. She started getting hysterical when she felt the effects of her overdose. She was getting sleepy. Yesterday morning was a cold one in my area. Icy conditions on the roads. Widespread crashes. All the good stuff. Lady calls in and complains about a suspicious substance on the road that made her car slip. She was driving too fast to see what it was but insisted that something strange was afoot. Middle of night shift. Get a report of a guy trying to ride on a moose. Officer attends. There is indeed a male trying to ride said moose. Male is wearing a high-vis vest and a helmet, which his girlfriend made him put on, for safety reasons, of course. We have a call that every new trainee at my county listens to during training, because it highlights how completely oblivious our callers can truly be. A neighbor enters her friend's house because she's not answering the door. She finds the patient on the couch sleeping. She calls 911 because she's not waking up. She says she's not moving, not answering me or waking up. It looks like she has been cooking with blueberries. Her hands are all blue. Operator already knows that means she's dead. We send everyone out. EMS arrives on scene first and immediately backs out. According to the deputy that arrived right after, she had a gun in hand, shot herself in the head and it splattered all over the wall behind her. Our caller never even noticed. Once my dad got a call from the 911 dispatch. At first he was really confused because he didn't call them in the first place. They asked, "Sir, do you have a daughter?" "Yes." "Why?" "Well, she just called and claimed you broke her heart. Apparently my sister got in trouble when she was about 5 or 6 and called 911 claiming my daddy broke my heart." She hung up in embarrassment after the dispatcher began laughing. Edit. I like this formatting better. Got a call from a woman in the wee hours of the morning. Clearly drunk and slurring. Full stop. She says, "I want you to send a no cipher to my house and take me to the bar. Wait while I get drunk. And then take me home." Me. "Mom, I think you are looking for a taxi service." Full stop. Her. "Well, you guys suspended my license." Full stop. Time passes. Full stop. Her. "Okay. I'm ready. Come and get me." Full stop. Me. "Mom, I already told you. We are not a taxi." Full stop. Her. "I got warrants." Full stop. Me. "Oh. Well, in that case." Full stop. They said she fought like a prize fighter. I'm not a 911 dispatcher, but I'm a central station operator. I'm the lady that asks what your password is when your alarm goes off. Been at my job 5 years. My favorite call ever was the second call I made to the house of an old couple. Their alarm had gone off about 30 minutes prior. They weren't sure why the alarm was sounding, so they asked me for the police to be dispatched. On the second call, the wife answered the phone, gave me all the correct information, and then passed the phone to the officer. The alarm was still sounding, but there was another weird beep in the background. We walked the owners through shutting their system off, but this beep was still going off. The officer was getting frustrated and the homeowners weren't sure why the alarm was still sounding, so they wanted me to shut the alarm down. I told him that our system was shut off and the beeping wasn't from us. The officer then went looking for the sound. He found out it was their alarm clock sounding. I swear I heard him roll his eyes through the phone, and I tried my best not to laugh. He handed the phone back to the older couple, who still had no idea what was going on, but said the officer told them everything was okay. TLDR. Old couple has us dispatch PD because of strange beeping noise. Officer arrives to find out it was their alarm clock. Edit. I can't spell. Also more details. Around 3 AM. Me. County 911. Do you need police, fire, or medical? Caller. Nope. I'm calling to report there is no emergency. Me. Okay. You don't need any assistance? Caller. No sir. Everything is good here. Me. Okay. Well, you called an emergen. Caller. Click. Well, I guess I'll go duck myself then. Thanks bud. So I am not a dispatcher, but I was a witness to this call while in high school. About 2 months after the Columbine shootings, I was hanging out after school by the JROTC building at my high school. JROTC is Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps, essentially pre-military for US high schools. The JROTC had a drill team. YouTube link to get an idea. But the rifles are dummy, weighted, realistic looking rifles that can't fire and could only be used as a club. The drill team was practicing after school, and after one guy missed the catch after throwing his rifle in the air, it came down and knocked him unconscious with a gash on his head. Spoiler, looked nasty but not life-threatening. The teacher, a former Navy officer, immediately started first aid and told a student to call 911. Cell phones weren't as prevalent then, and the kid went inside the building to use the phone. Now this is the dumb part. The student, panicking, told the 911 operator that his friend was hit by a rifle, B, at a high school, and was C, bleeding out. SWAT got there in about 7 minutes. Sees a bunch of kids holding what appear to be rifles. Yeah, it was a clusterfuck. One ambulance, out of 10 sent, got there eventually after SWAT gave the all clear. The kid hit by the rifle was okay but needed around 10 stitches and ended up with a new nickname of Snipe. I'm super drunk and I got run over by a sled. Now in northern Alberta typically this would mean a snowmobile and potentially life-threatening injuries. No. His kid hit his ankle bone with a wooden toboggan. Didn't even have a bruise. Edit. Spelling. Some lady wanted the fire department to come burn her house down because she thought a demon lived in it. I sent paramedics and police to check on her, but I told her we'd be happy to burn her house down in a controlled training capacity if she wanted to donate it. But there was a lot of paperwork to get that started. Me. 911. What's your emergency? Caller. There is a horse laying down in a field. Me. Do you believe it is injured? Caller. No, it just normally stands up. Me. Yeah. We will have a deputy go look at it. And yes, the horse was okay. Not a dispatcher, but I have a story about a dumb 911 call. My ex's mom wouldn't buy him McDonald's. The guy is 15. His mom said no, there's food at home. So being an adult he calls 911. Then he's ashamed of calling 911, so doesn't say anything. One of his sisters is screaming at him for being an idiot and the other is laughing hysterically. His mom had to get on the phone and explain she raised a bratty kid who throws tantrums when he's told no. Guy gets his truck stuck in the mud while out doing donuts at 3 AM and calls for help. Tell him he needs to pay a tow truck to winch him out. Guy gets angry and claims we are leaving him stranded in the dark. Spooky. Tell him we can send an officer out to check on him if the area isn't safe. Y'all got me ducked up. I'm on probation and you trying to send me back to jail. Tow truck arrives and while trying to winch him out, guy keeps taking off his clothes and trying to have a sex with his girlfriend in the backseat of the truck the driver is working on. Tow driver leaves. Guy calls back and is now very angry that tow driver didn't give his girlfriend a ride home, since he's gonna fight the cops when they show up. Additional officers were sent. I'm not a 911 dispatcher. However, I have a funny story involving my work and a 911 call. I work as a game master for an escape room company. We have a particular room that involves a phone, in which you need to input the correct phone number into it to progress in the room. It's not a real phone, but one of the players had said, "Dial 911. Their Apple Watch then dialed 911. They apologized and said that there were hostages in an escape room. Luckily the dispatcher understood they were playing a game and not real hostages. For those wondering, if you input 911 into the phone in that room, it will say something along the lines of "you are unable to make the call as dialed." Working right now. My favorite call of all time was up in arms about lobsters being reserved at the local grocery store. He had a fit and called back a few times, screaming and crying from the seafood counter in a store I used to work for. I eventually sent an officer, threw an even bigger fit in the store. Dinner was cancelled and Lobster Man spent a night in jail. I called my old co-worker to get the play-by-play from inside the store. I had a woman call 911 to ask if it was legal to sell a baby. I had a guy call to report information on a drug dealer because the dealer had sold him meth instead of coke. The guy said this was an ongoing issue and he had finally had enough. Repo companies in the area report their repost to us, just in case the owner decides to try and report the car stolen. I started my shift that day logging several. When one of the owners calls in, we take his info, confirm it matches, and let him know it was reported as repossessed and to contact his finance company. A little while later, he calls 911 again to let us know that he paid it up to date and the address they gave him to pick up the car didn't exist, so he wanted to report it stolen. We again refer him to his finance company. A few hours later, he called 911 again. He checked his onboard GPS signal and saw it listed his car in another city, the next state over. So he had driven there and searched the city, but didn't find it. So it had to be stolen. We again explain it was repoed and to continue speaking with his financial institution. The day carries on, and we eventually get to the end of the shift. As we are wrapping everything up for our shift up before night shift gets in, he calls 911 again. He found the tow yard his car was stored at, but it was closed for the night. He needed us to open it for him so he could claim his car. We explained that it was a private business and the car wasn't stolen, so we can't just bust in and take his car. He will have to claim the car once they are open in the morning. He was so moved by our logic that he decided to try reporting it as stolen again. Edit. My biggest comment ever. I should have asked for gold. Obligatory not a 911 dispatcher, but I live in northern British Columbia where seeing moose and other wildlife is a pretty common thing. Anyways, we had an exchange student from some place that apparently never has seen wildlife before. A moose was apparently in her driveway and was happily munching on a tree. She freaked the duck out and called 911 reporting a large four-legged Sasquatch was eating her tree. I mean really. She came on an exchange to Canada and had never even heard of a moose. My favorite was one taken by a co-worker. She had a guy who called to report hearing gunshots. He was the kind of pompous ass who insisted he could tell her the caliber of the gun from the sound of the shots. The officers were checking the area, and he called back. What he insisted was a certain caliber gunshot was actually a can of Coke exploding in his freezer. My most recent was a lady today who kept calling because she wanted to complain about her husband having their children. They are going through a divorce, but still legally married. In our state that means they have equal custody rights. She just kept telling me that he wasn't a US citizen, and she didn't like it when I told her that didn't matter. She actually asked me to send somebody to report him. I politely declined that. Reminds me of reading the sheriff's blotter in my rural county's newspaper. Man called to report he sneezed 23 times. Woman reports odd noise outside her home. Police discover a branch moving in the wind. Was always good for a chuckle. Old woman called the non-emergency line complaining that people were parking under her tree and it was killing her tree's roots. I asked if they were parked in her yard. Nope, they were legally parked on the street. She started ranting and yelling. I passed it down the chain to the traffic sergeant. Crazy tree lady started calling daily. She never did get her no parking signs. Mostly because of all the name calling. No joke. An old lady called and complained about the black foreigners which were just going for a walk. There are so much people who call us about things which has nothing to do with us. And some people are really racist. Answered a 911 call from a gentleman stating someone was chasing him. He had no idea where he was other than it was near the beach. I used the phase 2 location from his cell phone to start officers while I tried to get more information. Because English was not his first language and he seemed extremely panicked. He's in a vehicle and another vehicle was chasing him. I heard sirens in the background and asked him if he knew who was chasing him. He said yes, that it was border patrol and he was scared and refused to pull over for them. I convinced him to pull over for one of my officers and that was the end of it. TLDR, illegal immigrant called 911 because border patrol was chasing him. Not me, but I had a dispatcher friend who had a call. A passerby on the sidewalk heard screaming. Turns out a couple was getting frisky. The wife was tied up on the bed, naked, and her husband was nude except for a Superman cape. He jumped up to get on the bed, hit his head on the ceiling fan and knocked himself out cold. The wife started screaming, and the passerby checked it out and called the police. 3 AM. Got a call about a suspicious vehicle outside of her house. I start getting the description and get my officers en route when she says they're leaving. I get the direction they are headed and relay it. I've got 4 officers converging like a net on this guy. Now that I've got a moment, I ask the woman, what exactly did they do? She replies, they just stopped at the stop sign for a moment and then they moved on. My sister once called 911 because someone TP'd one of our trees on Halloween Eve. 20 years later, I still give her it for that. I got a call one night about 3 AM. I hear a buzzing noise coming from my neighbor. I bet it's a meth lab. Sent an officer with the lowest of priorities. Turns out it was a vibrator and not a meth lab. If you're wondering, yes, this was in Florida. Not a 911 dispatcher. I was a firefighter though, and I can give you 3 off the top of my head. 1. 4 AM. Call of smell of gas. Which is weird because in my service area most houses have electric stoves. We get there. It's from a weed eater that fell over. 2. Smell of smoke right after the first cold snap all year. Usually late November, early December in FL. Everyone is turning on their heaters for the first time since last year. The dust is burning off and they're calling 911 reporting a smell of smoke. This goes on for days. 3. My personal favorite. Middle of July during a torrential summer thunderstorm at 7 PM we get a call from an elderly woman who has called in a lightning strike that has set a tree on fire. We get there, jump out of the cab to see a hysterical woman screaming that it's burning and it's going to spread to her house. It's a street light. She has glaucoma.